The story of Hotel California is weird, and it's a story that has a very sad ending. The song began as a demo written by Eagles guitarist Don Felder. Felder would often bring instrumental demos he'd written at home to the recording sessions so that the other members could help write lyrics and turn these instrumental ideas into fully worked out songs. For each album he'd bring in 15 or so songs, most of which wouldn't be used, but every now and then there'd be one that might have potential. Don Felder wasn't actually part of the original Eagles lineup, only joining during their third album. This meant that by the time of making Hotel California, they actually had 2 guitarists in the band. And the demos he was bringing along offered a chance for the band to try something musically very different.
I wanted to write something musically that would fit 2 guitar players, that we could play off of each other.
This instrumental demo, which unfortunately has never been released, became known as Mexican reggae. But at this time, there were no lyrics, there wasn't even a theme to the song, so Don Henley and Glenn Frey started to think of an idea that could fit with Felder's demo. This was now the mid-70s, and the Eagles were making a conscious effort to try and move away from their earlier country sound, and more towards the rock sound that was the sound of the mid-70s. The demo as well offered something mysterious, something cinematic, and the idea of California soon became an obvious theme. None of the Eagles were from California, and they all saw themselves as visitors to this epicenter of the musical world. They came up with the idea of a traveller who, tired from driving a long distance in a desert, saw a place for a rest and pulled in for the night, but instead entered into this weird world.
Don Henley and Glenn Frey, especially Don, wrote some just brilliant lyrics. Don, as a lyricist, writes these little postcard pictures, and he throws you a picture on a dark desert highway. You can see that. Cool wind in my hair, you can feel it. The warm smell of colitas, you can smell it.
This was how the Eagles saw California. They were all visitors there, they all moved there, dreaming to make it as musicians. But it turned out to be this really weird place.
You know, we were all from different parts of America. Everybody was going to Los Angeles. That's where everybody was, to try and make it. California at that time was this big hotel, was this big melting pot of people with talent trying to fit in. And that's what we meant about California at the time.
Their change away from country also allowed them to experiment more with their lyrics. They were big fans of Steely Dan, who often wrote abstract and weird lyrics. And in one of their songs, they mentioned the Eagles.
Turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening.
So in return, Hotel California contains a playful nod to Steely Dan. In terms of a real hotel that inspired the song, the closest was the Beverly Hills Hotel, one of the best known hotels for rock stars and celebrities. And it's also the hotel that features on the cover. I love this cover, by the way. It's actually quite a blurry photo, but it has such a vibe, such a mood. It really captures the mystery of the hotel, and it captures being at a distance. I think it's great. But its blurriness and the way it was shot actually happened by accident.
Hotel California was possibly one of the most expensive album covers I've ever worked on. We shot the Beverly Hills Hotel as the sun sank slowly into the west. He would duck down and I would use his back as a tripod. And then I'd run out of film and I would duck down and he would use his camera on my back.
The Beverly Hills Hotel were furious when they discovered they were featured on the cover, and even threatened to sue. But when it became clear they were actually making a ton of money from the publicity, they soon relented. Because the song wasn't written by one person, when it came to recording the song, it had to be sort of put together as they recorded it. Actually, because the recording session took place so long after Felder had written the original demo, by the time it came to record the song, he'd forgotten how the demo went.
Don Henley came in the control room and said, no, stop, what are you doing? And I went, well, we're playing the guitar parts for these. He says, no, that's not right. You have to play it like the demo.
Felder had to make a call to someone at home, find the cassettes, and play it over the phone so that he could relearn it. The song actually went through several different versions before sounding the way it does today. They first recorded the song's basic tracks without any vocals or overdubs, but when it came to record the vocals, it was at the wrong tempo. So they went back to re-record the basic tracks at the right tempo. Don Henley then later went in to record his vocal, but he was singing in this high falsetto voice.
Because I wrote it in E minor, which was a good guitar key to play in, right? And so we wound up moving it down to B minor, which is not a fun, friendly guitar key, you know? But anyway, that's where Don's vocal really set best his range, so that's where we re-recorded the whole thing for the third time and finally redid all the guitar parts and everything else.
By now, they had moved from recording in LA over to Miami. Producer Bill Zimzik was concerned about there being an earthquake in LA, so he asked for the recording to be moved to Miami. But as they got to Miami, they came across even more problems. On numerous occasions, recording had to stop because Black Sabbath were recording in the next door studio, and they were so loud it could be heard in the Eagles studio. And Henley and Fry were still unsure about the lyrics, continuously working to try and perfect them. They spent 3 days on their own away from the rest of the band, just working on the lyrics, so that Don Henley could get on with recording his vocals. Although the Eagles played live together when recording in the studio, the finished song on the record was actually made using 33 edits. By the time we recorded the third version, we'd pretty much refined what we wanted and everything was set, including the arrangement and the tempo. I had a system where I'd pull all 5 takes of however many reels there were, and I'd put them all on a master reel. Then I'd cue it up and listen to all 5 intros and pick one, listen to all 5 verses and pick one, and then go back and physically lop it all together. One of the things the song is best known for, of course, is the guitar solo at the end. It's one of the most famous solos of all time. But how did this work? Because the Eagles now had 2 guitarists. Well, as Don Felder mentioned when he first wrote the song, he wanted to try and make something that worked for 2 guitars.
And I started trying to conceptualize how Joe and I, who had just joined the band, could do that guitar dueling thing on the end of the song.
If you haven't listened that closely before, you might think it's just one guitar or maybe overdubbed, but if you listen carefully, you can hear there is a difference in tone. The session of the solo took place over 8 hours, just Felder and Walsh jamming with each other on the solo. When the album was finally completed, the band sat through a playback with record executives.
When the Hotel California cut came by, Don turned around and went, "Yep, that's going to be our single." And I went, "Don, that's the wrong song."
The record company said, "You got to do an edit, you got to do an edit." And we all said, "No, take it or leave it."
And so it became the single. The song and the album became instant classics, becoming Eagles' best-selling album and one of the best-selling albums of all time. And it was this perfect moment between the country style they'd started with and this move towards rock. One of those moments where everything comes together and just falls into place. It was no doubt a high point for the Eagles, not just commercially but also creatively. But as so often happens with these high points, things start to go downhill. After releasing Hotel California at the end of 1976, they released one more album, The Long Run, in 1979, before breaking up the following year. This change in direction that gave them such success with Hotel California soon saw them drifting apart. Heated arguments behind the scenes soon became common, especially between Don Felder, Don Henley and Glenn Frey, the 3 who each helped to write Hotel California. This great moment in their history would start to get very weird. Following the breakup, they each pursued solo careers. Don Henley saw the most success with a string of hits and albums in the 80s. Glenn Frey also did very well. But Don Felder, his success was more modest, and instead he focused more on family life and getting involved with other musical projects rather than building his own solo career. 14 years after breaking up, Eagles reunited for a one-off MTV special, which resulted in the live album Hell Freezes Over, a reference to a quote by Don Henley about the possibility of an Eagles reunion ever happening. But at their first live performance in April 1994, Glenn Frey told the audience, "For the record, we never broke up, we just took a 14-year vacation." In reality, there was something very different about this new era of the Eagles. The success of the Hell Freezes Over reunion led them to go out on tour and permanently reunite. But when it came to organising the finances of the group, things had changed. Henley and Frey wanted more money.
I'm not going to do it unless Don and I make more money than the other guys. We're the only guys who have done anything career-wise in the last 14 years.
As our friend J.D. Souther used to say, time passes, things change.
In the original days before the breakup, everything was split 5 ways between the 5 of them in the band. So understandably, Don Felder wasn't happy about this new arrangement.
So when they decided they were entitled to more money, I said, oh, okay, but let's just try this and see how this works. And if there's still problems with it, we'll renegotiate.
The tour went ahead as planned, but when it came to renegotiate, Henley and Fry maintained their belief that they were entitled to a greater share.
And I called Felder's representative. And I said, hello, Barry, this is Glenn Fry. I'm sorry you happen to represent the only asshole in the band, but let me tell you something. You either sign this agreement before the sun goes down today, or we're replacing Don Felder.
Felder was out of the band. He sued the Eagles, but Henley and Fry countersued Felder when he released a book telling the story of what had happened. The case was settled out of court, and Don Felder never rejoined the Eagles. The 3 songwriters of Hotel California, this song about a weird world full of weird people, in a way, that's what they became.
It just broke my heart. I miss these guys, but I really miss the friendship and the music. Okay,